That which climbed through the basement window was not human, but it copied human speech perfectly. Elias stood frozen in the center of his bedroom, the silence of the Appalachian night pressing against the walls of the old house like a physical weight. The digital clock on his nightstand read 11:14 p.m. The house, a sprawling structure built into the side of a hill, usually groaned and settled with the temperature drop, but tonight it was holding its breath. Then the sound came again, the distinct metallic thud slide of the basement window sash being forced upward. Elias's stomach dropped. He knew every inch of this house. He knew the basement window was a sliding reinforced glass pane, and he knew, with the obsessive certainty of someone who did not like being left alone, that he had locked it 3 hours ago. The latch was rusted. It required significant force to disengage from the inside, and it was virtually impossible to shimmy from the outside without shattering the glass. He waited, his breath hitching in his throat, praying for the sound of a raccoon, a stray dog, anything but what his instincts screamed it was. Elias? The voice drifted up through the floorboards, muffled but undeniable. It was Toby, his older brother. Elias exhaled, a mixture of relief and confusion washing over him, though the knot of anxiety did not fully loosen. Toby was supposed to be at a bonfire party near the quarry, a good 10 miles away. He was not due back until sunrise. Elias, hurt. The voice came again, clearer this time, drifting up the ventilation shaft. Sounded wet, weak. Toby? Elias whispered, stepping toward the bedroom door. He pulled his phone from his pocket. No service. The signal in the valley was notoriously spotty, often dying completely after midnight. Window, stuck. Leg, broke. Help. The cadence was strange. It was Toby's pitch, Toby's deep baritone, but the rhythm was flat, lacking the sharp spikes of pain or panic one would expect from a broken leg. It sounded like someone reading a grocery list. Elias gripped the doorknob, his knuckles white. The logical part of his brain, the part that kept him alive in these isolated woods, was firing warning shots. Why come through the basement window? The front door key was under the mat. Why not scream? The voice was barely above a conversational volume. Elias, come down. The plea cracked at the end, a sudden, sharp intake of breath that sounded agonizingly real. The protective instinct surged, overriding the cold logic. It was his brother. Maybe he was drunk, maybe he had fallen into the window well and cut himself. Maybe he was bleeding out on the concrete floor while Elias stood here debating the nuances of tone. I'm coming, Toby. Hang on. Elias shouted, his voice cracking. He grabbed the heavy-duty mag light from his dresser, a steel batten of a flashlight, and threw the bedroom door open. The hallway was a tunnel of shadow. The stairs leading down to the main floor creaked under his socks, and the second flight, the one leading into the earth, waited behind the kitchen door like a black mouth. He reached the kitchen. The house was dead silent again. Toby, Elias called out, pausing at the top of the basement stairs. Down here, the voice replied immediately. It did not sound closer. It sounded exactly the same volume as before. Hurt. Bad. Elias unlocked the basement door. The smell hit him first. Not the usual musty scent of old cardboard and dry dust. It was the smell of a forest floor after a week of rain. Heavy, cloying rot, wet soil, and something sharp and metallic, like ozone or copper. He clicked the flashlight on. The beam cut a cone of dust motes in the darkness. He had a choice. Slam the door and lock it, hoping the morning sun would reveal nothing more than a prank, or descend into the dark to save his blood. Please. The voice whined from the bottom of the stairs. Elias took the first step down. The basement steps were narrow, steep wooden planks without a railing on the left side. Elias descended slowly, the beam of his light sweeping the concrete floor below. The air grew colder with every step, the temperature plummeting as if the earth itself was sucking the heat out of the house. I'm almost there, Tobe. Just hold on, Elias said, his voice trembling. He tried to sound brave, the way a 13-year-old thinks a man should sound, but the flashlight beam jittered in his shaking hand. He reached the landing. The basement was a cavernous space, cluttered with the remnants of his grandparents' lives, stacks of newspapers, covered furniture, and rusting tools. "Over here," the voice said. Elias swung the light toward the sound. It came from the far corner, behind the hulking shape of the furnace. He swept the light toward the window first. His heart hammered against his ribs. The window was indeed open. The sliding pane had been shoved all the way back. Mud smeared the white sill, and a trail of wet, dark sludge led from the window, snake-like, winding across the floor and disappearing behind the furnace. "Toby, I can see the blood," Elias said, nausea rising in his throat. "I'm coming." He stepped off the landing onto the concrete. The silence of the house seemed to press in on his ears, heavy and suffocating. "Leg broke," the voice said from behind the furnace. Elias froze. He was 10 feet away now. "Leg broke," the voice repeated. Elias took a step back. The intonation was identical. Not similar, identical. The same slight waver on the word leg, the same downward inflection on broke. "Toby," Elias whispered. "Leg broke," the voice said again. There was a pause, a soft hiss of static, like a scratched CD skipping, and then, "Help, Elias." The hairs on Elias's arms stood up, painful and stiff. The smell of rot was overwhelming now, choking him. He realized then that the silence was not total. Underneath the thrum of the furnace, there was a wet, slapping sound. Slap, drag, slap, drag. He was on the ground level now. The stairs were behind him, but the darkness seemed to have thickened, swallowing the exit. He had walked right into the trap. He had let his love for his brother blind him to the obvious wrongness of the world. "Say something else," Elias demanded, his voice barely a squeak. "Toby, tell me what we ate for dinner." Silence from behind the furnace. Then, a sound that made Elias's blood turn to ice. It was not a voice. It was the sound of his own name being constructed, syllable by syllable, by something that was learning how to shape the vowels. "Elias." It sounded like two stones grinding together. Elias griped the flashlight so hard his hand cramped. He needed to run. He needed to turn around and sprint for the stairs, but his legs felt like they were encased in cement. The fall was not just physical. It was the collapse of his reality, the safety of his home, the trust in his brother's voice. It was all dissolving into the damp, dark air of the basement. The wet dragging sound stopped. "Come closer," the voice said. But this time it was not Toby's voice. It was Elias's own voice, recorded and played back to him from the darkness. Elias stood paralyzed, the beam of his flashlight shaking violently, casting erratic shadows that seemed to dance and stretch on the concrete walls. The mimicry of his own voice broke the last dam of denial. This was not a prank. This was not an intruder. This was something ancient. He swung the light directly at the corner behind the furnace. The beam cut through the gloom and landed on a figure. It was crouching, facing the corner, its back to Elias. It wore a denim jacket, Toby's denim jacket. The familiar patch of a local heavy metal band was stitched onto the back. For a microsecond, a desperate, foolish hope flared in Elias's chest. It was Toby. He was just in shock. "Toby!" Elias cried out, stepping forward. At that exact moment, a buzzing sound vibrated against Elias's thigh. He stopped. The figure in the corner did not move. The buzzing continued 3 short pulses. A text message. Without taking the light off the figure, Elias fumbled for his phone with his left hand. He pulled it out, glancing down for a fraction of a second. The screen illuminated his terrified face with a pale blue glow. A single bar of service had miraculously flickered into existence. Sender, Toby, bro message. Yo, staying at Micah. Too drunk to drive. Do not tell mom. Lock the doors. The phone slipped from Elias's sweaty fingers and clattered onto the concrete floor. The noise was deafening in the stillness. The figure in the corner stood up. It did not stand like a human. It unfolded. The legs straightened, but they kept going, extending impossibly long, the joints popping with the sound of snapping wet branches. It rose until its head nearly brushed the exposed rafters of the basement ceiling. The denim jacket strained and tore down the middle, revealing skin that was the color of a bruised plum, slick and hairless. "Lock the doors," the creature mimicked, reading the text message Elias had just seen, although it could not possibly have seen the screen. Slowly, agonizingly, the thing turned around. Elias tried to scream, but his lungs were empty vacuums. The creature had no eyes. It had no nose. Its face was a smooth, wet expanse of gray flesh, unbroken save for a single feature: a mouth. It was a vertical slit that ran from where the forehead should be down to the chin, lined with rows of translucent, needle-like teeth. It tilted its head, the smooth flesh twitching. It was listening. It was savoring the frequency of Elias's terror. "Do not tell Mom," it gurgled, the voice shifting from Tobias to a distorted, demonic deep fry. Elias was at the bottom of the pit. The creature stood between him and the only way out, blocking the path to the stairs with its unnatural reach. The flashlight beam trembled on the creature's chest, and the thing stepped forward, its movements jerky and unnatural, like a claymation figure missing frames. The creature hissed, the vertical mouth opening slightly, tasting the air. Elias watched, his mind racing at a fever pitch, hyper-focused by the adrenaline flooding his system. He noticed a detail, a small, insignificant twitch. Every time the furnace hummed or the house settled with a groan, the creature's head snapped toward the sound. When Elias's phone had hit the floor, the creature had flinched violently. Blind, Elias realized. It hunts by sound. The creature took another step, its long, pale foot slapping the concrete. It was testing the vibrations. It knew Elias was there, but the basement was an acoustic mess of echoes. It needed a target. It needed him to scream, to run, to give away his exact position. Elias held his breath, his chest burning. He tightened his grip on the heavy maglite. It was solid steel, weighing nearly 3 pounds. The creature lunged, a sudden, blurring motion, closing half the distance in a second. Stopped, head cocked, waiting for the panic. Elias did not give it the satisfaction. He did not run away from the creature. Instead, he wound up his arm and hurled the heavy flashlight as hard as he could, not at the monster, but high and to the left, toward the collection of old glass jars on his grandmother's canning shelf at the far end of the room. The flashlight spun through the air. The beam created a strobe effect, light, dark, before it smashed into the shelves. Crash. The sound was explosive. Mason jars shattered, metal rang out, and the flashlight clattered loudly against the wall. The creature shrieked, a sound that was not human speech, but the high-pitched feedback of a microphone getting too close to a speaker. It whipped around, abandoning Elias, and launched itself with terrifying speed toward the source of the noise, claws tearing at the air. Now, Elias moved. He did not run. He sprinted, a silent explosion of kinetic energy. He did not care about the darkness. He knew the path. 3 steps to the landing. He vaulted onto the stairs. The creature heard the movement. Behind him, the shrieking stopped, replaced by the wet slap of feet changing direction. "Elias!" it roared, using his mother's voice now, angry and commanding. Elias scrambled up the wooden steps on all fours, slipping, clawing at the wood. He felt a rush of air, the displacement of something massive swinging at his legs just inches below. He hit the top landing, spun around, and grabbed the heavy oak door. He slammed it shut just as a heavy weight collided with the other side. Boom! The door shuddered in its frame, dust raining down from the header. Elias fumbled with the deadbolt, his fingers numb, finally jamming it home. He threw the secondary latch. He backed a chair under the knob. He collapsed on the kitchen floor, gasping for air, tears streaming down his face. His heart felt like it was going to burst through his ribs. From the other side of the door, the pounding stopped. Silence returned to the house. Elias lay there, staring at the gap beneath the door, waiting for the police, waiting for dawn, waiting for reality to make sense again. Then, from the darkness of the basement stairs, a sound drifted through the crack. It was soft, rhythmic, and terrified. Ch-ch-cha, h-ch-cha, h-ch-cha. It was the sound of hyperventilating. It was the sound of Elias's own breathing, being played back to him from the other side of the wood, waiting for him to open the door.